Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into something really fascinating today, a piece of source material that completely bridges the gap between antiquity and the modern world. We often think of ancient texts as just being filled with dusty historical stories, right? But what if a text written centuries ago mapped directly, and I mean perfectly, to both today's global geopolitical tensions and our very own personal daily struggles with control? Well, that is exactly what we're unpacking today as we explore the incredibly profound metaphor of the ships and the wind.
So to kind of ground this, let's look at what's happening in the world right now. The author of our source text notes that when you read these ancient verses, it immediately brings to mind the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz. We see this literal, modern-day example of massive ships navigating really uncertain waters, caught right in the middle of geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and Iran. This isn't just some abstract theory. It's a live-action demonstration of massive, consequential movement happening on the global stage where the stakes are incredibly high and the environment is entirely unpredictable. All right, moving into Section 1, Ships Like Mountains, Sailing the Sea. What's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer scale of the imagery used in this ancient text, from the Quran, Surah Ashura, verse 42-32. Among his signs are the ships sailing like mountains on the sea. Before we even decode the deeper metaphor, just visualize that literal picture in your head for a second. These ships are so massive, so imposing, they're literally compared to mountains moving across the water. They represent immense human engineering, power, and forward momentum. We build these towering structures and just set them in motion, kind of marveling at our own capability.
Section 2. The illusion of control, power, and motion. But then the very next verse totally shatters that illusion. Verse 33 says, if he willed, he could bring the wind to a standstill, and they would lie motionless on the surface of the sea. So the absolutely crucial point here is that these massive mountain-like ships, despite all of their size and human engineering, are entirely dependent on something completely invisible and entirely uncontrollable: the wind. Without it, they're just stuck. They literally become motionless mountains.
And this is where the source author brilliantly maps this metaphor directly over to our modern daily lives. On one side, sure, you have the literal ships depending on the physical wind. But figuratively, the ships represent our worldly affairs, our jobs, our careers, our money, our projects. We love motion, right? We want progress. We want our careers to advance and our wealth to grow. But just like those massive ships, our forward motion relies heavily on external factors, the figurative wind, that are completely beyond our control. The economy, other people's decisions, global events. If the wind stops, well, our ships stop. Which brings us to this really profound question drawn from the end of that verse. If our personal ships are stuck and the wind just isn't blowing, why does the text specifically say there are signs here for anyone who is steadfast and grateful? Like, why are patience and gratitude the required responses to a lack of motion? This is exactly the kind of deep reflection the author encourages, to not just passively read the text, but to actually wrestle with it. Next up, Section 3, The Secret to Progress, Finding the Answers. So the author points out that deeply questioning texts like the Quran leads to these highly individualized moments of clarity. They call this the aha moment, or that eureka experience. And it's a truly incredible process. Because think about it, the questions you ask about your stalled career are going to be totally different from the questions someone else asks about their finances. But by reflecting on these texts for days, you start to uncover answers that specifically guide your life. It's this active, deeply personal process of decoding meaning to navigate your own unique worldly affairs. And through all that reflection, the author uncovers this deceptively simple secret to dealing with our lack of control over the wind. Be patient and be grateful to God. When your worldly affairs are just completely stalled by external factors, fighting the lack of wind, that doesn't make the ship move. Acknowledging your lack of control, maintaining your patience, and actively practicing gratitude, that is the actual framework required to understand the mechanics of progress.
Moving right along to Section 4, Nature's Warning System, Signs of Misdeeds.
Now, the analysis jumps into verse 34, and this introduces a much more severe scenario. Or he may cause them to founder because of people's misdeeds. He pardons many of them. To founder basically just means to wreck or to sink.
The text is explicitly tying negative consequences, the actual wrecking of our personal or collective ships, straight to human actions, to what it calls misdeeds or wrongdoings.
The author looks at this as a natural law, kind of like a built-in warning mechanism. Think of it like that jarring emergency alert you get on your phone or an incoming missile siren. Step 1, there are human misdeeds. Step 2, the winds stop, things start going wrong, and our systems actually begin to fail. This is the warning. Step 3, it's entirely up to us to detect those signs and fix ourselves. There is this inherent law of nature that sides with truth, where wrongdoing inherently has negative consequences. The author even points out you can go search for the meta crisis on YouTube right now to see super modern, complex discussions about this exact phenomenon, these converging global failures acting as a massive warning system.
But you've got to listen really closely to the specific phrasing here. The text says God may cause them to founder, or he could destroy the ships. It doesn't say he automatically will. The author stresses that this is a deliberate lesson. God is teaching us how to think. By showing us that total destruction is possible and entirely out of our hands, we're basically forced to realize our absolute vulnerability. We are forced to admit that actually, no, we are not the ones keeping this whole operation running.
And our final section, Section 5, the mercy that moves us, embracing vulnerability. To really grasp this, the author asks us to just look honestly at the reality of human systems and products. Think about the apps on your phone, government services, global supply chains. Absolutely nothing is 100% perfect, is it? In fact, I think we can all agree that human services almost always cause absolute nightmares at some point down the line. Why? Because we fundamentally lack total control. The author makes a profound observation here. The natural order of things isn't actually order at all. The natural order is disorder, entropy, things falling apart. It is definitely not our human IQ that keeps the world functioning.
So here is the grand realization, the big macro-philosophical takeaway from this ancient text. It is mere mercy that things are working at all. The verse mentioned earlier that while ships could founder due to our misdeeds, he pardons many of them. Every single day that the global supply chain functions, every day your career actually progresses, every day the metaphorical wind blows and the ships don't just sink into the sea of disorder, it is solely an act of immense love and mercy. The very moment that mercy is lifted, literally anything can stop working.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question to reflect on as we wrap up. If the natural order is actually disorder, and our human systems are inherently flawed and totally dependent on invisible winds, where in your life are you falsely expecting 100% perfection? Are you stressing out over a stalled ship right now, completely forgetting that it's a miracle it ever sailed at all? Take a moment to think about the wind moving through your own life, and really ask yourself what it means to be steadfast and grateful.